Hi, it's Mike Stevenson here. Today in this video we're going to talk about Serverless 360 and how we can monitor a long-running business process when it's implemented with Logic Apps and Data Factory. The techniques we're going to show you from a Serverless 360 perspective could be implemented with multiple different technologies such as functions, custom code and other technologies, but this example we're going to look at Logic Apps and Data Factory. So in Serverless 360, we've got all these different modules, the four shown on the screen here. In today's session, we're going to be talking about business activity monitoring, which is this one up here. Business activity monitoring is intended to allow you to have not just a monitoring of your technical components, but we can look at monitoring the business process. So we're looking at things like how do you monitor the processing of an order as opposed to how do you monitor a function or a logic app. So we're taking it to a higher abstraction level. Now, in the example today, the example architecture we want to talk about is this idea of we've got a logic app, we've got a data factory. This is based on a real world example that I had. So we receive a message coming in from Service Bus here. This triggers our logic app. The logic app checks if file exists in SharePoint, and we know we need to import this file into Dataverse. So what we would do is we use the logic app to trigger the data factory. That data factory would import the file, and then it would go and bulk upload the data into Dataverse. There could be quite a lot of records to process, and this is a good example of combining both logic apps and data factory, where in logic apps, if you've got tens or hundreds of thousands of records to load into Dataverse, doing it in a logic app with some kind of loop would be quite an inefficient way of doing it for a large number of records, whereas Data Factory, we can take advantage of the bulk import capabilities on Dataverse and the advantages of processing big files. Now, the problem that we might have is we trigger the pipeline down here from Logic Apps, and then we've got to wait. So the Logic app could implement this in a couple of different ways, but in our case, we were just calling to check when the pipeline was finished. Now, the problems we might have is either the pipeline might error out, so we don't get to a completed state, or it might take longer to run than expected. So imagine a scenario where normally your process takes 20 minutes to run. It's been running for an hour, it hasn't failed yet. So the chances are that probably wouldn't trigger your monitoring, because most of the monitoring is based around the idea of something's failed, therefore we know there's an error. In this case, it's just taken too long to run, so we've got this kind of gap in the Azure monitoring where you can't really easily check, is it just taking longer than I expect? So what we can do here is, this is where we can use BAM, so we could have our logic app. We could add shapes. Maybe we add a shape here to start the process. We might add a shape just after we've triggered the pipeline, and then we might add a shape after the pipeline's complete, and maybe one at the end. And what we would be doing here is in our logic app, we'd be sending events to BAM, the business activity monitoring module, to say how far we've got through this process. And then the idea is from a sort of support user and a business user perspective, they can have visibility of what's going on in this integration. So they have visibility, they can troubleshoot it, you can do things like reprocessing. But the thing we're really interested in is when we trigger this pipeline, we've got this sort of time here where, in the example I've said, normally it would take about 20 minutes to run. But if this takes, say, it takes 60 minutes, excuse my terrible writing there. So if it takes 60 minutes, we wouldn't know that there's a problem. So the idea is in Serverless 360, we can monitor the delay here between those two checkpoints. And if it goes beyond a threshold, then we can have an email go out, or we can have a notification to your support team to tell you there's a problem, something's just taking longer to run than expected. Now, this is the real world example we looked at where we've implemented this with a customer. I'm going to show you an example in a minute where we're going to take one of the demos I did at the Integrate Summit where we were looking at a process that executes an Azure automation account. It's the same concept though, where we're looking at how long did something take to run. So we'll jump over to the demo and have a look at that. So in the demo here, we're going to take a look at a slightly different logic app than the slides that we've just looked at. Really, I wanted to show the slides a real-world example of where we've used this, but this demo does the same thing, but it's from the Integrate Summit demos we did. So here I've got a logic app where we're doing a user creation from Active Directory, and then after that user's created, we then go and activate their mailbox. So we get a message here from Service Bus. Here we're starting a BAM transaction, so you can see in the window here we've got a call out, we're passing in some data, and we're calling out to BAM to say, look, we've started this activate mailbox transaction, and then we're going to go down and we run this. We run this job here that says calls an Azure automation account to trigger a mailbox activation job. So that'll go and run a bunch of PowerShell that'll activate the user's mailbox. Now we're calling it, and we're not waiting until it's finished. We're just going to fire and forget. Well, fire and check later, I guess. So we trigger the job, and then we're going to checkpoint here to say that we've started the mailbox activation job, and I'm going to pass some details of the job itself. You can see here I've got the user's email that we're trying to activate. Now, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to simulate a long-running job. So this is a thing we had problems with in the real world on this similar example where a user's activation job sometimes would just take longer than expected to run. But here I'm going to run the delay shape. So we run the delay shape just to simulate this long running process. Then we're going to check the status of the job, check what the result was, and then depending on whether it passes or fails, we'll have a complete shape sent to BAM or we'll have a failed checkpoint sent to BAM. Now, just to reiterate, the bit that simulates the long run process here is this delay shape, and I've just got a kind of a random variable that'll tell the job how long to run for. So you'll notice how some of these logic apps are really quick, and then very occasionally we'll get one that runs for a bit longer. So the idea is in BAM we can use that like delay between how long it takes to process just to demonstrate how to use this feature. So over in business activity monitoring here, I'm in my human resources area, and I've got my HR person sync. So I've got all of these different transactions that especially people at the Integrate Summit might recognize. You can see them all running through here. And we've got these activate mailboxes. So we can see Martin Probert, his activation was good, but actually it took 14 minutes to run, but it was successful. So I can go in and I can have a look that we received the message. So we got his message to come and activate his mailbox here. And we can see from the PowerShell activation, we can see what happened, was it successful, etc. And if you notice in the logic app here, we trigger the job and then we set the mailbox, set the checkpoint, sorry, to say that it's an in progress status here. And then further down when we complete it, I'm just saying it was successful, or if it was here, I'd say it failed. Now, I've now got these transactions available to view in my history, just like all of the other BAM transactions in Serverless 360. But what I'm able to do is if I go over to the monitoring area, and we can go into the duration monitor tab here, and you'll be able to see on the activate mailbox transaction here. So if I just open that back up, you can see I've got a couple of shapes. So I've got the transaction and then I've got these stages. And what I've said is, so you have a couple of choices here. I can say, look, monitor the entire duration of the transaction. In my case, I want to monitor just that one step, that PowerShell activation step. And I've said there's a warning threshold of 12 minutes and an error threshold of 14 minutes. So if it goes beyond 14, we get an error. You can see here I've just put a note saying the mailbox activation job's taken longer than expected. Check on it. So this is where I could write some notes for the support operator when they get an email that this is taking longer. I can tell them what to do. So I might say go and check on the automation account and see if there was any errors in there or something like that. So that's how easy it is to set up. You just see these sort of durations that you can configure for the shapes in BAM, and then that basically gets it up and running. We'd be regularly checking to see if any of these transactions have this stage taking longer than we expect. Now, what you can see here is the reason this is red at the minute is I've actually had some previous errors for this. So you can see I've got, if I click the top one, we've got one transaction exceeded the duration threshold of 14 minutes. So I know that's the error I've got here. I can click on this and I can go and view the instances. Let me just close that down. And this shows me the instance that took more than 14 minutes. And I can open it up and I can go and troubleshoot and see what went wrong. In this case, I know it was a success, which was fine. There's a potential it could have still been running. So if I had, let's say, that example from the data factory slide, maybe the job's still running processing a really big file. So I would go and check data factory to see what was going on. But the idea here is to just show how easy it is to add this duration monitoring for these long-running background processes, that it's really difficult to monitor them out because there's not really a feature out the box on Azure that you can easily monitor this with. Hopefully that just lets you have some ideas about how you can take advantage of this feature for things like logic apps, maybe something like durable functions where you've got long-running tasks. Definitely data factory, Synapse pipelines, Power Automate, they could all leverage this duration monitor feature. Thank you for listening to today's demo about duration monitoring using BAM from Serverless 360 to monitor the duration of things like logic apps, data factory. Check out our QR code here. Come and arrange a demo. We'd love to chat to you from our consultant team and show you some of the other features in Serverless 360. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.